Good day, everyone. This is S.J. Thomason with Christian-Apologist.com, and I'm very pleased to announce that I'm here with several other Christians. And today we're going to chat about some really interesting things. So we're going to talk about evidence for God and the reasons why we've chosen Christianity and why we've chosen Christianity over other faiths. And we'll even talk about the burden of proof, whether the burden of proof is on atheists or whether it's on Christians to provide the burden of proof of God. So before we do that, I'm actually going to go around and we'll introduce our friends to you. And we're going to start with Maria. So Maria.
Hi, you guys. Welcome. And my name is Maria Izquierdo. I'm from Puerto Rico. I'm very happy to be here. I've been Christian my whole life, but I can say that I really started practicing the faith, and I have my very close encounter to Jesus just maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm very happy that happened. I'm very proud that right now I can live a life that's full of service and love and just ready to show other people what it's like to experience this. So welcome.
Excellent, great. So 5 or 6 years ago, I'm going to keep that in mind because you and I are on the exact same page. That
Oh,
happened
good.
to me about 5 or 6 years ago. So that's pretty. And you
Nice.
teach, as you mentioned before, you teach Christian classes in a Catholic school,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, that's true. So I'm also a teacher, and after I had my encounter with Jesus, for some reason, I'm just going to say that God decided that it was my turn to teach religion and values to my students. So I'm dealing now with 7th and 8th graders. So you can pray for me on that.
Yeah, that's a challenge. My sons are that age, so
Yeah.
yeah. So next, I think someone's got something ringing in the background there.
Oh, sorry. That's the bell.
Oh, no
I'm
worries.
here in
Okay.
school. I'm here in school. So
Okay.
yeah,
Oh,
that was the
wow.
bell.
Okay. So let's go to Eric.
Cool. Yeah, I'm located in British Columbia, and I picked up apologetics about 4 or 5 years ago. Before I thought it was, blind faith that you just believe because you believe, and now I understand it's kind of the exact opposite. And that was a big change for me. I watched a lot of debates between William Lane Craig, Frank Turek. One of my favorites is John Lennox. You ever heard John Lennox debate? He's got a Scottish accent. He's just the most friendly guy. He's absolutely amazing. And at that point, I started to realize, okay, there's reasons to believe in God. But what interested me is why don't people understand that, or why do they dismiss it? I don't get it. I don't get the cognitive bias in a lot of ways. And that still interests me to this day. Even I'm a full-time photographer, and a lot of times in the background I'll just listen while I edit photos for hours and hours and hours. I'll listen to debates in the background, and I'll listen to back and forths. And there's some theists who do a lot better than others. Some atheists who do a little bit better than others. Like Hitchens is a terrible atheist, but it's funny. Yeah, it's just very curious and interesting to me, the thought patterns there. For instance, if an atheist says, "Oh, there's no proof of God," and I'm like, "Okay, well, what about the Kalam or the teleological argument?" And they're like, "Oh, those aren't proofs." And I'm like, "So the Kalam doesn't exist?" That I like the whole thing is really interesting to me. I'm more interested by the human aspect, I think, than the actual apologetic aspect. All the apologetics kind of keeps me coming back.
Yeah, I agree. That's and you brought up a couple of points I think you might want to chat about a little bit more in a little while. Is your views on Hitchens? I think that sounds interesting to pursue, and your thoughts that they have a bias, because I can already see somebody in the chat saying bias. What are you saying? So we'll have to come back and talk about that. Hey, everyone here, if you're what might make it pretty nice as far as noise is if you mute when you're not talking. That might be a good idea, and I'll try to do the same thing after we get through this first group. Okay, so let's go on. Let's talk to Jan.
Hi, I'm Jan Martin. I've been a Christian all my life, very involved in the church, and thought I was doing enough, and God called me to go back to school and become an associate in ministry. And then I found out he wanted me to end up being a children's author. So he's got me on a whole new path after I retired. I write children's books, and looks like he's taking me on some more different directions with the writing. So all to do help my faith. It's like the one is crafts, but I pray for the people I make gifts for. So he's using me in many different ways. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It'll be fun.
That's wonderful, and I love the idea that you're a writer and you're writing children's books. So that's a great thing. And so we'll have to talk about the age group. Which age group are you focusing on? Is it?
My one book is for a Christmas book for families, and then I have first chapter book series, and then my new craft books that are coming out are from 6 to 12, but I've had adults say they would like mine because mine are more detailed and more helpful. So
that's great.
We'll see where it goes.
Yeah, that's actually what brought me to Christianity when I was very young, was the C.S. Lewis book. So I absolutely adore the Narnia Chronicles. And so and I've always wanted to write something like on that line too. So I can see where you are. I understand that.
You can do it.
I hope. Okay, so let's go on to Thomas.
Hello, can y'all hear me?
We sure can.
Okay. Anyway, I'm Thomas Underdahl. I'm coming from El Paso, Texas. I've been a Christian since about 82. I was in the army in Germany, and there were some people from Teen Challenge that were out there, and they're the ones that made the introduction. And I've been with the Lord ever since that time. And I guess as far as apologetics go, I didn't know it at the time, but I guess I was kind of always in it. When I was starting out, I was always thinking of reasons why people should believe. And I guess it's kind of stuck with me ever since. I like to chat about it. I like to talk to people about it. It's my favorite topic, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I find energy in that. I'm supposed to be writing a textbook right now on human resource management. I have a deadline. I have to get this done. And for some reason, I keep getting sidetracked and I keep writing these blogs because I just love writing the blogs. I wake up and I get all excited about something I'm going to write about. And it's not human resource management. I hate to tell it. Don't let my boss hear that. Okay, so let's talk about the first question. So, and I know, there's so much proof as far as we're concerned and as far as we've seen. So the first question is, when you're sharing with people on even social media, or you're sharing with people in your real life, and you're sharing with people on the evidence, if someone came up to you and said, well, geez, how do you know God exists? What do you find, and we can just kind of go around, what do you find to be a pretty compelling argument for you? What's for me, I'll just say that I'd love to tell my personal story, but a lot of people don't believe my personal story. And so you kind of have to, for me at least, I found that I have to go beyond that. And maybe not so much for people who know me, but people on social media, I would have to go beyond that because they just say, I don't believe you, you're a liar, you can't be telling the truth. I do get that response sometimes, but so I've been trying to find other pieces of evidence that through apologetics in different places. And so I just want to go around. We could even go back to the same order if you want, or we can just mix it up a little bit, whatever you guys think, and just chat about what you think would be a good reason if someone came up to you and said, hey, why is there a God, or why Jesus Christ? What would you say? Who wants to go first? Oh, okay, so we'll go right over to Eric.
I think there's a difference, and I've talked about this before. I think that there's a difference between proposing a proposition and accepting a proposition. You can give people very convincing reasons that God exists, but they don't necessarily have to accept it. And that's the real problem here. As I said before, the cognitive bias, right? So a good example is, let's say that I've been putting premium gas into my car for about 5 years, and I've spent thousands of dollars on premium gas. You say, okay, here's a study that says putting premium gas into an 87 octane car, it poses no benefit. Because I'm so invested, because I have my flag so deep in the sand, I'm going to say, no, that's crazy, that's wrong. I had a friend who's been drinking bottled water for years and years, and she refuses to believe that tap water is decent just because she's committed to it. That being said, though, and I think that's the biggest point. The biggest thing that I'm wrestling right now. I don't believe that there is a lack of proof of God in Christianity. if a person asks me, why do you believe in God? I'll probably say, well, there's a lot of really great arguments. We have the beginning of the universe, which we call the cosmological argument. We have the design of the universe, which is your teleological argument, and of course your anthropic principle. And then, of course, you have your design of life, which that fits into your teleological argument as well. And then you have the moral law, which I think is less convincing, but it's still, it's still a piece of still a Lego piece in the castle. Now, the evidence that God doesn't exist, I believe, is perhaps the argument of evil and suffering. So you'd have to say, if God was good, he would not allow suffering in the world, which I think is fallacious because we're allowing suffering. You can't say because cars crash, they don't exist. You can't say because God allows suffering, he doesn't exist. Well, according to the moral law, things even being called good or bad are in a way proof of God, or at the very least an absolute standard of right and wrong, which kind of points towards God. All right, I think that was about 2 minutes.
Maybe I can add a little bit to that.
Great, yeah.
There's a story that I heard like a few months ago about this barber that was cutting the hair of a non-believer, and the non-believer asked him, how can you believe in God? And the barber, gave his explanation, and he was very convinced of the love of God and what the Bible said. And the non-believer said, well, I'm very sorry, I can't believe this. And he left the barber shop. And when he went outside, the barber went out to get him. And he says, you know what? I want to give you a nice explanation of why I believe. And the reason is this. And he took somebody out of the street and he said, this person has a long beard. He has long hair. So are you going to say that barbers don't exist? And the non-believer said, well, how can I say barbers do not exist? You're right here. And he said, exactly. This man has long hair and a long beard, not because I do not exist, because he chooses not to come into my barbershop. So I think it goes down that path also. There are so many arguments, convincing arguments. And I think it's more of what a person wants to believe and wants to see. So if there's proof, are you ready to open the door to that proof? Are you ready to accept what others are trying to talk about? Because it's not only my testimony, it's not only your testimony, it's about a lot of people. We're not talking about hundreds of people, we're talking about millions of people that have been touched by God. How can you ignore that? Or at least that's my point of view.
I think that's a good point of view, and I love the barber analogy because I mean, not this isn't the reason because I love it, but I used to use that on Twitter. I used to find a picture of a really airy man, and I was going to use the same thing. So, it's like the guy had hair all over the place. And so anyway, I won't go back to that. Yeah. Okay, so let's go. Jan, would you like to piggyback on that?
Sure. If somebody asks me why I believe, I see, just look out at nature or look at the human body. It's like, how can you not believe there's a God? Everything is so complex that how could just a man's mind come up with everything that there is? Growing up in the church, it was like it was always there. I've had a stronger faith since I've grown older and learned more. But I think where my faith is the strongest is when I return to being a little child and sit on Abba Daddy's lap and say, I'm done. I can't take this by myself. I need you. And I was facing surgery one time, and my one concern was that I had cancer. And our oldest daughter was only 2 at the time. And I was just really scared. And when I finally turned it over to God, I literally felt the weight being lifted from me and felt at peace. I was no longer afraid to go to the hospital to find out what was going on. So that's the best example I can give people that there really is a God out there.
I love that. I love that. That's like take the burden off your back, and that's beautiful. So what do you have to say there, Thomas?
Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to go a little different route. What do people take for proof? And initially, I was going to talk about the complexities of nature. I mean, science is showing us just how complex things really are. Uh, just a single strand of DNA is incredibly complex. How can all of this just happen by chance? You know, is be one thing I would say. But then as I was starting to think about it, well, there's different things that speak to different people as far as proofs go. And I recall a story about it was a woman, she was a cashier at a CD store, and a minister came in, and she knew that this person was a minister. And so he bought some items there. And as he was checking out, she purposely gave him more money than he was due. And he went out into the parking lot and he counted his change and realized he had received too much money. And he felt a conviction, a very strong conviction, to go back in and give that back. And which he did. And when he did that, she said, you know, I've heard a lot of things about Christians, and I know you're a minister. And if you had not come in here and given me back that extra money, I was about to chuck all of Christianity out the window and not believe in it at all. So there are things that speak to people at different levels. I've heard it said that we're the only Bible some people will ever read. So our actions also give proof that there has been an interior change to us, that there is a God who is real and that he works through his people. We're all his ambassadors and he's equipped us to be such.
Yeah, I like that. So that's a great way to put it. And thank God the pastor actually counted the money, because what if he just walked out there? Sometimes I take money and I might not, I just shove it in my wallet and don't count it. So I'm so glad he did, because that would have been terrible. We'd lose a Christian over that one. So there was probably a little whisper in the pastor's ear to count the money, I bet. But I'm just putting it out there just for those of you who want some other support. I think, and Eric, one thing you mentioned, and I just want to build off it a little bit, was the moral argument. To me, I know that we have the cosmological and the teleological, and even there's an argument from an aesthetic apprehension, just the way that humans appreciate beauty and art and these sorts of things that we can't explain through evolution necessarily. And so that's kind of an interesting thing. And there have been arguments on that. But the moral argument to me is, I think you could look at it this way, and I think this is a good way to put it. I have a biology textbook that I got just recently because I wanted to study up on the whole argument that how empathy was developed in humans and whether it came from certain animals and social species and that kind of thing. And it was there's a big question, because I study cross-cultural things and I study cross-cultural scholarship and psychology, and countries vary to quite an extent on whether or not they're collective or individualist, and whether or not they're hedonist versus more anti-materialism, and whether or not they're focused on self-transcendence or self-enhancement. So we've got all these country level differences, but somehow the entire world, and I can say with the exception of 1% psychopaths or 2% more of sociopaths, but somehow the entire world knows what we ought to do. So even though we're in these cultures where we have these, in the United States, we're the most highly individualistic place. We don't like necessarily working in teams, but yet we all know we ought to help our neighbors, and we ought to do good, and we ought to tell the truth, and we ought to be humble. It's like, how did that come about? So how is it that the whole world ought to be good, ought to be just? Why? Why is that? And so if you look back at Plato in his book Republic, you'll see he created a world where everybody was the opposite, to just kind of get a view. What if we all cherished selfishness? How did it happen that we happen to cherish justice, and humility? And so anyway, that's kind of interesting. So would anyone like to talk about that anymore? If you do, we can keep going on that, or we can even talk about what we find pretty compelling about Christianity itself. And we can think about that as opposed to maybe other faiths, or the reason why you think that Christianity might be the correct faith. If anyone would like to start on that, that'd be great.
I was going to mention, as far as like morality and stuff, I think that goes back to we were created in the image of God. And when you think about that, is, well, what is God like? And I think that's where our moral code comes in. I was thinking about what C.S. Lewis had said in Mere Christianity, that every culture and every person has a sense of right and wrong. While we may not agree with the details, that sense is always present in every person. And why is that? You know, I've heard that it was a product of evolution. I've heard theories about that. But then the scripture tells us we're created in his image also. And I think that's where we can go, if you want to talk about that, is that he gives us his take on things. And that's embedded within our character and in who we are as people. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's a great point, because there are scriptural passages that make it clear that morality is written in our hearts. So I like those points. Who else would like to chat? I see Eric just freed himself up.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I was going to say I really, really enjoyed everybody's different perspectives on the proof of God and Christianity. You know, I went at it kind of from a logic perspective, which is sort of how I work, and it's not overly effective. And I noticed other people kind of went through, you know, stories and their own stories and all that. So it's really cool. As far as the problem with atheism, I don't think that you can I don't think that you can give right and wrong, inherently knowing what's right and wrong as a compelling reason to believe in God, at least not from the get-go, because they're going to say that because of evolution, we flourished because of people having empathy for others, or because of right and wrong. And to be honest, they are right and wrong and empathy are, unless it's too much empathy, which can be very bad, but it's generally a good thing that we do have empathy, and it does encourage flourishing. The trouble, I think, the real trouble behind that is under atheism, and this is one of the reasons why people are reluctant to believe in God and reluctant to believe in Christianity, because under atheism, there's no compelling reason to do good. So say I don't know, I'm running the gas chambers at Auschwitz. Under atheism, it doesn't matter when I die, I might as well flick that switch. Under Christianity, I'm probably going to go to hell if I flick that switch. And that way, atheism offers a lot more freedom than Christianity does. Christianity says, here's some morals, you should adhere to them. They're from God. And atheism says, do whatever, it doesn't matter.
That's a good point. That is a good point. And that I've seen stories of, I think it was prisoners in Russia, and the Russian guards making a joke about how it really doesn't matter how they treat them because they weren't held externally accountable. So it's very sad. It's a sad take. And then I mean, now just to be fair to the atheist community, and I know there are some listening right now because I can see them in the chat. I know there are some atheists who've adopted humanist values, and the humanist values tend to be pretty similar in a lot of ways to some of the Christian values. So I will point that out. Then there are the Satanist atheists, and in that group, they adopt more of an egoistic kind of perspective and following the writings of people like Ayn Rand. So just putting that out there. So what else would we like to, who else would like to talk right now? I don't know if Maria, are you ready to say anything more?
There, the microphone.
There you go.
Well, just the morality of it. If you want to do good, you do good. If you want to do bad, you do bad. God gave us free will. He gave us the choice to do good or do bad. It's our choice. And if you're an atheist, you get free will too. So it's not a thing of Christianity or doing right or wrong. It's just being a good person. So as an atheist, well, you should be a good person anyways. But being a Christian gives you a different perspective, just in the way of doing something different, because I consider I was a good person years ago. I didn't consider myself a bad person, I didn't do bad things. And yet, 6 years ago, my life completely changed. And I can tell you now, very sure of myself, then I am a better person because I serve others before I serve myself, because I love in a different way, because I forgive in a different way, because there are so many things that I do different because I follow Jesus and I follow his example. So it opens more doors. I think that's about it.
Yeah, those are great points. It does open more doors. And I think that also kind of piggybacks on what Jan said earlier, as far as, I think it was Jan who said we should set an example. We all fail. I mean, I'll be the first to say, man, I fail every single day on setting an example in some way. But that's our goal, certainly.
Yeah, I think that Eric was the one that said it before, that we lead by example, and our actions speak very loudly, and we just have to lead by example. So when people ask us, oh, what are you doing things differently? Why are you this different person? How can you love this way? Oh, how can you forgive? How can you forget so fast? I said, well, maybe you should come and learn about what I know about. Come and learn about Jesus. Come and learn about my God. And you're going to see a difference. That's about it.
In that also, if you guys remember, there was a church that was, I think there was a man who went in and he shot up a church, and I think it was South Carolina. And a lot of the people who were in that place, or it was a place of worship that people were worshiping or doing a Bible study or something like that. And a lot of the people got on TV and forgave him. And I think that shocked many people when they saw that, because it was really close after when it occurred. So that was something that you see that. I mean, it's not easy to forgive, especially in something so horrific. So.
Right. And I think when something like that happens, it's hard to forgive. But if you do forgive, you're actually helping yourself. The other person doesn't care whether you forgive them or not, or else you're giving them the lesson of being a Christian and showing that you care by letting it go. But if you harbor that hurt, that anger within yourself, you're hurting yourself more than you're hurting anybody else.
Great point. Great point. Thomas, did you want to chat a little bit here? Wait, you've got your microphone.
There we go. Okay, there we go. I was thinking about evolution again, though, but when we forgive someone who wrongs us, there's no evolutionary gain in there that I can see when I started thinking about that. How does that promote survival or, make us better or something like that? It's not geared to, the wrong is still there. And it seems like in that sense, if we're going to say evolution, our morality evolved, well, where did this come from? It's not a natural reaction. Our natural reaction is, well, I've heard, don't get mad, get even. But that's not how God operates. And so his example through us, when we forgive people for doing terrible things to us, we're actually showing something otherworldly to people that they would not otherwise see. And so that's just one case. And when that happens, it's like a tremendous light goes off and people see that. And there's how do you explain that from if there is no God, then everything is, you can do whatever you want. There's no transcendence. So what's the gain in doing something like that? What's the purpose in doing something like that? I think that's a stumbling block in a way to evolution in a sense. Where did forgiveness for wrongs come from? I'm just throwing that out there.
Those are good points. Now I'm seeing in the chat, there's a couple of, I was thinking, now what are atheists going to say to that one? And I see, I can see that a couple say, well, if you forgive, then you're going to reduce anger, reduce stress. So a couple of them have come up with some hypotheses here on forgiveness and how we evolved, forgiving, or to prefer, or lean towards, or we ought to forgive. So would anyone like to talk about that? Or
it is in the Bible. that Jesus said, "You who are without sin, cast the first stone." So if you feel like you're good, then you wouldn't throw the stone. You know that you innately have sin. We're all born with sin. We always want to focus on ourselves. But when we turn to others and say, okay, you did a wrong, but who am I to say that I should stone you because of what you did? Each of us has to face God with what our choices are in our life and go that way, not, so I can't throw a stone at somebody because they believe differently than I do. It's not, it's not the way we should do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it looks like let's move on and chat about why do you think Christianity is the, I mean, some people make an argument that they'll say, oh, well, you were born in a place that is the United States where it's 86% Christian, or they'll say you're born in this country and there's lots of Christians, so therefore you became a Christian. And William Lane Craig says that that's the genetic fallacy, because it's using how you came to a belief to say that the belief is untrue. But how many of you have taken a look at other faiths? And I haven't done a real deep look at other faiths, I'll be honest. I've done sort of a more of a shallow look at other faiths, but because I was looking at the things about Christianity that differentiated Christianity, and I found Christianity to be very compelling, as far as Jesus and solving that whole issue with mercy and justice. A God fully merciful and fully just needed to be able to have something pay for the sins of humanity, and Jesus took that role. But anyway, so going back to other faiths, if any of you have any of you looked outside, or has it always been Christianity, or anyone do any investigations on what other people are thinking about or believing?
There's actually a book called Kingdom of the Cults, and it's amazing. I recommend it. I'm sure it's in every church library. It's in mine. And it goes into what a lot of other religions believe. The trouble is that, once again, you have all these religions. Now, I have trouble calling them religions. I'm going to call it religious views, because then we can bring atheism into there. So if your religious view is that there's not very much proof of a God, or if your religious view is this or that, I found Christianity and Catholicism have always been the most alluring to me. Some of the problems with say Mormonism or Jehovah's Witnesses, like that whole thing, is it doesn't allow a lot of outside information in, and it doesn't allow for a logical standpoint. For instance, a Mormon apologist, I just don't see the debates between Mormon apologists and Christian apologists. Once they can elevate themselves to that level, I absolutely will take them seriously. But for now, I mean, we have situations like on Reddit r Mormonism, where they're not allowed to go to certain parts of the internet, or they're not allowed to read certain books. And I think that any religion that encourages your confirmation bias is probably hiding something, and it from a logical standpoint, it doesn't work for me. The interesting one, though, I gotta say, is atheism. And I'm saying religious viewpoint. I'm not saying religion. We're not going to open up that debate. If your religious viewpoint is that there's no God, or if there's not a lot of evidence that there's a God, that's fine. You can believe that. But what I've heard from a lot of atheists is that of the thousands of gods that there are, you're going to believe in the God of the Christian Bible, or in the God of the Bible. And their argument is that that's exclusionary. And I think what they're forgetting here is that every truth claim is exclusionary. That's what makes it a truth claim. Science is very exclusionary. Science tells me meteorology tells me that it's raining outside. That's excluding every other weather pattern, the thousands of weather patterns that there could be. Atheism does the same thing. Atheism says that every view on gods and gods is incorrect or doesn't have sufficient proof. Whereas their vision is, I mean, you can play shoe on the other foot there, see how far it gets you. The bottom line is, of all the religious views, atheism included, I find that Christianity makes an encompassing argument. Does that make sense? Does anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I like those points. You made some really good points. And just bringing up, that's a point to look at also, I wasn't even thinking of so much, was different sects within Christianity, or different groups of people who practice somewhat similarly to Christians, which is, I think, the Mormon and the Jehovah Witness groups. So actually, let me ask you all this. I think I mentioned before to Maria, I was raised a Catholic. Now I go to a Baptist church and I affiliate with the Baptist faith. But and I hear that, I just heard Eric, you say you're a Catholic. What is everyone else here? And I think Maria, you said you're a Catholic too.
I'm actually Calvinist now.
Oh, you're Calvinist. Okay.
Yeah, I switched.
So we've looked at different sects within our own faith. I think I did the same. I tried out a lot of different churches, and I sort of ended up, I was in a Lutheran church. I was married in the Lutheran church. I moved around.
Yeah.
So
I grew up Lutheran. I've served in a Lutheran church and a Presbyterian church. Now we're worshiping at a Methodist church. But considering looking at a non-denominational church, getting very tired of the denominations saying, well, we're better, you have to believe this way. It's like, my faith is in God. I don't need the traditions of each of the different types of churches to worship God. He talked to us from a hill. He talked to us from the water. He didn't have all the stuff we have. All that is man-made. And I think a lot of people have forgotten where their true faith should be, not with the traditions that go in the different congregations. I really don't think, I think we're missing the point on that.
interesting. What do you think, Maria?
Well, I was raised Catholic. I went to a Catholic elementary school and then to high school. And right now I teach in a Catholic school. I go to a Catholic church. And my experience is that I jumped from church to church looking for a place, not only that what the priest said was something that touched me, that reached my heart, but also the community. I had to make a click with it. And I think I traveled a lot of places looking for the right place for me. And I finally found it like 3 years ago. I'm going to this great church where I have this great group of brothers and sisters. We've been through very tough times and we've been there for each other. And I can really, really say that I experienced the love of God there. And I'm very grateful to have that opportunity. And I think I'm very open to just talking about whichever group or whatever religion, and being open to that there is a God and we're all loved by him. So I think that's the important part.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the point that I think we're all kind of saying the same messages. We've tried different churches and we're not necessarily saying, I think that for some people, my sister's still in the Catholic Church. She really relates to the Catholic Church very well. She loves the sacraments, and it really speaks to her development and what her needs are. And for me, the delivery of a contemporary service is what speaks to me very well. And so I switched, and I love the way my church delivers the message. But because we're all so different, I think that's why there are so many different sects in Christianity. We have different types of things that might appeal to different things that we need. And so, so what do you think, Thomas? Oh, wait, you got your speaker.
Am I on now?
You sure are.
Okay. Well, yeah, I've heard that before too. I started out in a Lutheran background, I guess, if I'll put it that way. And then when I went into the military, I came in touch with Teen Challenge. And when I came back to the States, I attended a Assemblies of God church for a long time. And I hate to say it, but I guess I'm freelancing right now. Because I think, you know what, the Lord will put me in the place that he needs me to be. And right now I don't have a specific congregation that I go to. The closest thing that I do associate with is Messianic Judaism. Because for me, when I read the book of Romans, for example, it talks about Jews and Gentiles together. But then I started looking at congregations that I'd been involved in, and I said, there's no Jews in any of these congregations. there are no Jews. Nobody is wearing a talit. You don't see any Jewish influence whatsoever, and God still loves the Jews. He wants them to come home and to be grafted back into the trunk, which is Yeshua, Jesus the Christ. And so I started looking into that, and I started attending like a Passover Seder and Feast of Tabernacles. I went over that, Yom Kippur, and I started finding a richness that I had never gotten in any of the other mainline churches. It's like they would go so far, or they would say, "Oh, that's the Old Testament. We don't do that anymore because we're under grace." But when I started listening to these rabbis who became Christians, their Judaism gave the whole Christian walk an entirely richer and more clear flavor, I want to put this, than I'd ever seen before. Now that's my take on this because I've been there, but for me, that's my experience and where I'm at right now. And I would encourage anyone to look into that. Go to a Passover Seder, go to a Feast of Tabernacle celebration, and see what it's like. There's no harm. So I just thought I'd throw that out.
That's really interesting. I'm friends with a person called JJ Richardson on Twitter, and he's very much an advocate of that same practice of Messianic Jews, and he's given a couple of books. One's called Our Father Abraham, really good book, that explains a lot of the traditions and really what Jesus was raised in. So we can't forget that Jesus was raised within the Jewish tradition. So and it helps explain those things. And actually, I think it's really important we do understand the whole Passover, because Jesus was the Passover lamb. He's the sacrifice. And so just understanding exactly how that came about and how they were practicing that and how they're still practicing Passover, I think is rich and helpful. So I'll have to agree with you there. So let's ask, we had another question we were going to talk about, and that was the burden of proof question. And I think that, wondering, now we're all on social media. We've all met on social media. And in 2014, when I got on social media, my first interactions with people who were non-believers came when I hashtagged a lot of things with Christian or Christianity or something having to do with Christian. They found me. And so I started interacting with them. And a lot of them would say, well, I'm an atheist, and that's defined as a lack of belief. And so therefore you have the burden of proof. And you have to prove to me if God exists. And so so what do you think about that? And do you think that's the right view, or do you have a different view on atheism and whether or not they have the burden of proof? And I know that Eric has pretty strong opinions on this, so it might be a good one to start with.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna look it up, simply put, the burden of proof lies with the one who's making the claim. So if I'm unable to say disprove your claim, that still doesn't count as the burden of proof. I've had some atheists come at me with God is a negative claim. You don't have to prove negative claims, which I don't think is true. If I didn't, if I said no, Australia doesn't exist, that's a negative claim. I would hope that I'd have some good reasons to back that up. Anytime you make a claim, so if you claim there is no God, or if you claim there is a God, you have a burden of proof. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because the atheists will say, okay, well, I have a lack of belief in God. So they'll try and frame it as as putting the burden of proof upon us, right? And I mean, it's easy to pose proofs of God, teleological argument. You go to the William Lane Craig debates, you can go to the Turk debates. Turk's been going around universities lately and talking to atheists. Like there's a lot of evidence out there, and it's fairly easy to come by. But once again, they don't have to accept it. What I think is really interesting is how could we move that burden of proof onto the atheist? I mean, believing there's no God, that's a big jump. That's like believing there's no Australia or believing the world is flat. It's a pretty nuts belief, but they say they have a lack of belief in God. And that's sort of where I'm hitting my head against the wall. It's like nailing Jello to the wall. Like so they'll ask me, do you have a lack of belief that I have a lack of belief in God? all of a sudden it's becoming phraseology, it's becoming hermeneutics, and I'm having a lot of trouble nailing it down. I mean, if they just said there is no God, I'd be like, okay, convince me. Let's hear your reasons for believing that. But now it's getting all lost. Like, oh, I have a lack of belief in God. Oh, my atheism is true because all my atheism is an explanation of my lack of belief of God. There's a Yeah. Okay. So that was a little bit longer of an explanation. I sort of went off a little bit there, but the bottom line is that the claim lies on the claimant. The other interesting thing to note is that a lot of atheists, especially agnostic atheists, will not say there is no God. So you can outright ask them, and this actually happened today. I said, do you believe there is no God? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay, cool, we're done. Wow, we both believe that we both don't believe that there is no God. We're good to go. And then at that point, it starts to break down even more. And once again, we have nails in the wall and we have Jello everywhere. I'd love to hear everybody else's perspective on that. Like, has anything worked? Like, yeah, tell me, fill up my brain.
Would anyone else like to jump in there?
Okay, let me try this out here. Maybe the lack of belief is like, I lack the knowledge that vegetables are good for me, so I don't eat them. It's your choice. Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense. I lack the knowledge of something that's there, so I'm not going to accept it. It's like I raise a white flag. It's not for me. And if you can't say, I do not believe in God, there is no God, then it kind of floats up in the air. What are you waiting for then? What else do you want to know? Because if it's a lack of belief, well, it can be filled with something. There is knowledge to share. There's proof. There's a lot of reading you can do, a lot of listening you can do. So I don't know. It's like an open invitation. I've heard so many testimonies of atheists who have become Christians or Catholics or whatever, and they had nowhere else to go. Like, they hit a wall right there, and they had to open their minds and open their hearts to everything that was out there.
Yeah, I agree that happens sometimes. I have always said Jesus works in the pits and not the pedestals. And sometimes when we do hit rock bottom, it's like, okay, Uncle, I'm ready now. This is it. I can't handle this anymore. You've got to help me. And I think, Jan, you had something like that earlier in your story. So would anyone like to add to that? Or you can even add on to what's an argument that you've made, or what's an interaction that you've had on social media that is resonating with you that you might want to share with anybody, because we could also go in that direction.
I'd just like to talk about the claim. The burden of proof rests on the one making the claim. Well, okay, we're saying that, well, there is a God, and they're saying that there is not. That is their claim, that there is no God and that everything happened as a result of random chance. Okay, well, then your burden is to show me how that is actually true. How did all of this complexity happen when even science itself tells us things go from complex to simple, not the other way around? So there's the burden of proof. They have a burden of proof also. It's not only upon us, but they have a responsibility to make their claims. And I've heard different things, and one person online mentioned something about the origins of the universe, and we say, according to the creation account, God commanded everything into existence. Okay, so there was nothing there at first, but when God spoke, the worlds came into existence. And so that's where we start at. But they submitted an article to me, and they said, see, science has come to the point where they have this theory now that how the universe could have happened by chance and from nothing. And there was a lot of technical jargons in there and stuff like that. And I said, well, that's an interesting point, because we're both kind of saying the same thing. There was nothing there at first, and yet something happened. Now there's matter, something that occupies space and time. But you're saying it was a random, spontaneous event. Well, we're saying that God initiated all of this. So we're really kind of very close here. We're getting a lot closer than you thought. And you might want to ask yourself this. If science is just now coming to this conclusion that there is a way for the universe to come into existence from nothing, then how did the writers of the scriptures know that, who did not have access to the technology and the scientific knowledge that we have right now? You might want to ask yourself, how in the world do they know that and put that into the scriptures? And we're just now finding out about that. It's just something to think about.
That's a good point, because it does speak to things like Hinduism. In Hinduism, they think it's sort of a never-ending eternal cycle. There have been a bunch of cycles that people have gone through, and it's just never-ending. So it does differentiate us a little bit from Hinduism. What do you think, Jan?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the Big Bang Theory, because the Bible didn't say that God created the world in 7 24-hour days. Each day could have been 1,000 years, according to, and time has changed over the years. Like, how could Methuselah be 696 years old on our calendar? It just seems impossible. But, and if I were to share my faith story with someone and try and help them to come to know God, all I could do was say, this is how he has spoken to me. This is how I read the Bible. This is how I interpret the stories. And we were given the gift of the Holy Spirit, and that allows us to hear what God wants us to do and guide us through our days. And that for me, I pray before I make almost any decision, or I see someone in pain and I ask God for guidance. And I've spoken to people and had no idea where the words came from, and I knew it was from him trying to reach out and help someone.
Yeah, that's another good point there too. So I think we're getting towards the end of our time here. I didn't know if anyone would like to make any closing points or closing notes. We can go around and each say goodbye. And if you have a blog, or you have a place, or you even want to name your Twitter account, whatever you want to do to let people know how they can find you. If they watch this video and they say, well, geez, I'd like to know more about what Jan thinks, or whatever. So if you want to share ways to get in touch with you, that'd be great. So we'll start with Maria.
Okay, I don't have a blog yet. Maybe it's in the making. I don't know. But you can follow me on Twitter, I guess. It has been a very interesting experience, and I'm just very happy to get the message out there. I think my closing point is going to be very simple. Give yourself a chance to listen to testimonies and give your chance to open your heart. I have students, 7th and 8th graders, who come with these type of questions every day. It's hard being a religion teacher and talking about God and talking about Jesus, something that happened so many years ago. I'm competing with Google. I'm competing with YouTube. I'm competing with music. And I have to make it all so new and so awesome to them. And I have to take them step by step. And if I can do it with a 7th grader, if I can do it with an 8th grader, if I can plant that little seed, you guys are doing the same thing through this type of chats and videos. And we just have to keep going. The message is going to spread, and the word of God is going to get out there. So I think that's the important part. Thank you for letting me be part of this group.
Thank you. Thank you. Eric?
Yeah, it's I'm stoked to be part of this group too. I mean, what I found really interesting is some atheists that I've responded to. I mean, mostly in real life, my uncle was an atheist. It was mostly it was a little bit of incongruence, but a lot of it was how dare you? And I thought that was really interesting. I tend to be fairly countercultural. So, I mean, if everybody believes in one thing, often I'll try to explore the exact opposite thing. So a good example is if everybody hates socks with sandals, I'm going to start like figuring, I'm going to very muchly want to buy some socks and sandals and wear them as quick as possible. I just love being countercultural. I think it's really funny. And that's what really interested me. A lot of atheists were like, how dare you assault my views? How dare you think something different? Everybody should think the same as me. And I think that's why as Christians we have to be out there. And we have erred. It's good to keep it lighthearted. It's good to keep it, kind of polite. It's good to maybe turn off the internet for a couple of hours and have a nice strong cup of coffee when you need it. But the question is there, atheism is there, and it therefore must be answered. And it's cool to see so many people out there trying to answer it, trying to tackle all of this. I mean, am I absolutely right? No, I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm going to change my opinion in 6 months. I'm open to it, but to do that, you're going to have to formulate an argument. You're going to have to tell me why I'm wrong. And I haven't really received that from atheism. All I have people say is, I have lack of belief. Lack of belief in one thing is abundance of belief in another. If I have a lack of belief that my car is in the parking lot, then I must have an abundance of belief that it's not. That it doesn't. It's not resounding to me. So it's interesting. I think apologetics will always interest me because it requires your brain to be. It requires you to expand your brain, to expand your views, to be open-minded, and to see how other people think. The bottom line is, though, that it must always be up for discussion. Christianity must be up for discussion. Legalism must be up for discussion. Atheism must be up for discussion. Agnosticism is kind of all over the place, but I think even in agnosticism, we should be able to say, okay, let's really put this thing under a microscope. Let's really involve these. Let's really look at these pros and cons. If you do want to get in touch with me, my Twitter is Erictron, ERICTRON. Sorry, TR0N. I work like 80-hour weeks, so I don't have a lot of time to respond when I do. But if you leave me a quick message, I'm happy to try and help you out a bit. All right, and thank you for moderating this chat. You've done a really lovely job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, it's been fun. It's been a good time. So, and actually, socks and sandals, I think that's so funny because I'm from Florida and Jan's from Florida too. And I've seen lots of people in socks and sandals. So I think you haven't been aware of this new trend that's going on here in Florida. So, Jan?
Yeah, thank you so much for this time together. It's been interesting to hear each side of the story for everyone. For me, I feel called to share my faith, especially with children, but to everybody with the faith of a child. I think too many times people try to talk on too high of a theological level, and you lose people because they don't understand what you're saying. And I didn't go to seminary as long as a pastor did, so I don't have as much knowledge to pull on, but I also don't have as much knowledge to try to dumb down, or, well, not dumb down, but trying to put it in a language that everybody can understand, and I think that's where it's, come to me with the faith of a child is what Jesus said. And I think that's where we have to learn. I am on Twitter. My handle is Jan, JANNW Martin, and I would love to talk with you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jan. So let's go on. And actually, it's ideal then in your situation that you're writing children's books, isn't it? So, I mean, if you know how to communicate that in a way that children can understand, and you can take a very high-level message and bring it to them in a way that works for them, and that's ideal. It's really great. So, so let's go on to Thomas. Thomas, you want to close it off?
Okay. Well, I was just thinking about some things that I might close out with. We just got to keep in mind, though, that this is a spiritual work. Um, and we really need the help of the Lord to make this point. It's in John 15, it says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. And so whenever I talk to people or something like that beforehand, I'll pray and I says, Lord, I am not an astrophysicist. I am not familiar with quantum mechanics. I don't have a graduate degree in science. I can't go head to head with these people in that sense. But I can give them what you give me to say, even if it's foolish. If it sounds foolish, it doesn't matter. As long as it's from him, it will not return void. It will accomplish its purpose. So I'm just saying we need to be willing to listen and say, Lord, how do you want to direct this to help this person out? What do you want me to say or do? Because if you do the work, it lasts. I will fumble the ball every time. But you know the right thing to say and the right thing to do. And I'd also just like to mention that, though, and again, I'm going back to what I said before, even if you're not actively talking to somebody, your actions are saying something. And I just thought back about what Lee Strobel said about his wife when he was still a reporter with the Chicago Tribune, and he was trying to disprove Christianity. He could not deny the changes that were happening in his wife. She wasn't saying anything really, but he noticed her behavior and her changes, and it spoke to him. You know, it impacted him, just that by itself. So I just thought I would mention that also. I'm on Twitter, TC Underdahl. I also have a blog, but unfortunately I don't contribute much to it right now. I am working on a book review right now. Hope to be finishing with that soon. That's thomascunderdahl.com. And if I get a chance to do this again, I hope I will. But for the meantime, I guess it's shalom for now.
Thank you so much. And I think that last point that you made that I think is so important is we should take what our gifts are when we want to share, because you're not expected to be an astrophysicist and to go up against astrophysicists. And I know I certainly couldn't go up against them, and I'm not going to try to go up against Richard Dawkins on biology. I'm just not going to do it. And so, but I will go up against people where it's a field that I'm very familiar with. And in my field, I'm in business, I'm in management. So if there's a way I can capitalize on that, I'll have to do that, because that's what I can speak about. And so I think that's something that we could all agree on. I typed your names, your Twitter handles into the feed here so people can see what they are. And Maria, yours is one of them. And Eric, can I just double check? You have a 0 in your name, Eric Tron with a 0, correct? Might have lost Eric. Okay, he's on okay, well, anyway, all right, well, thank you very much, everybody. I can't hear Eric. You're on mute right now. So
can you repeat just that last part?
I just wanted to make sure I had your correct Twitter handle, because I think I might have typed it in there wrong. Is it 0N Eric Tron with a 0 instead of
yeah ERICTR0N.
Okay, great, thank you. So, well, thank you all. I really appreciate it. I love the fact that you each brought in different perspectives and different angles and different strengths. And you were able to explain your position so well. So I really appreciate having you on, and I'd love to have any of you on again. If you ever like to come chat, you're more than welcome to. So you can reach me on Twitter. I just realized I didn't put my name in there, but it's LEAD, Lead 1225. And the 1225 is Jesus' birthday that we celebrate, the day we celebrate his birthday. So anyway, everybody, we're going to say ta-ta for now. Wonderful, and thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and I'll close this off. Bye-bye.